Do you want to start a thriving real estate career, but don't know where and how to start? Do you want to become a successful realtor or investor, but lack the required knowledge and skills? Gear yourself up with the best and actionable advice here on the Real Estate Rundown. Tune in as Shannon Robnett talks with industry veterans about all kinds of asset classes, market trends, challenges, management techniques, and success stories. Listen to informative discussions with valuable tips that will serve as the foundation for your incredible real estate venture. Now, here's your host, Shannon Robnett.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of the Real Estate Rundown. In today's episode, I got Reed Godson on the phone, and we're going to talk about what you do if you move halfway around the globe and start investing in real estate. See, Reed's journey brought him from Australia to New York City, no network, limited funds, to build a business out of nothing. And you're going to want to tune in to see what he's got to talk about, because we're going to discuss how to create a successful business ecosystem, how to make money entitling land, and how to develop an A team that's going to help you with the success. So with that, guys, help me welcome Reed to the show. Good morning, Reed. How are you?
G'day, mate. Thanks for having me.
So that's not a normal American accent. So what part of Australia are you from?
I am from the Sunshine Coast, a place called Noosa. It's a very tourist town. It's in Queensland. Think if you've heard of Brisbane, about an hour and a half north of Brisbane. So, yeah.
My daughter spent about 6 months in Maroochydore.
Oh, really? That's interesting. Yeah. What was she doing up there?
She was doing some missionary work. So
nice.
She was hanging out down there, and
beautiful. A beautiful place.
I actually snuck over there, surprised her over there. Yeah. That's not really something that's easy to do. You know, that's not just right around the corner, but what a beautiful place, man.
Yeah,
so
it is.
So you came to the States. Why New York?
So the reason is that I fell in love. I fell in love with twice. I fell in love with New York City. And prior to moving to the States, I'd backpacked through the United States as sort of after uni, you sort of go on a pilgrimage of checking out the world and seeing what you want to do with your life at 23, 24. And so fell in love with New York in 2009. I just said to myself, I need to live here at some point in the future. And at that same year that I was backpacking, I actually met my girlfriend, who's now my wife, Erica. She happens to be an American. So I moved to the United States in early 2012 to chase her, but also to live in New York City. And the goal was just to be an expat, live here, get a job, move home. That was really it. It was nothing more than that. I'd already been bitten by the real estate bug prior to moving to the US. But yeah, the US was such for me, it was more about just challenging myself to live in another country, right? To be an expat, to have a visa, to do all those great things. And, my fear, sort of the fear of regret, I didn't want to wake up when I was 60 years of age and go, I wish I'd moved to New York City. And now fast forward 10 years later, I'm talking about real estate. So,
You're just hoping you wake up at 60 years of age, right?
Exactly.
So, it's funny though, Reed, because you're talking about you moved to New York, and there's so many people in New York that want to move to Australia, right? I mean, everybody wants to go somewhere different. But when you got here, you said you were bitten by the real estate bug. I mean, what was different? What did you notice that was different between investing in the States and investing in Australia? And what were the nuances there of the difference?
Yeah, look, so I was bitten by the real estate bug prior to moving to the States, and I was sort of self-educating in Australia about fix and flipping and lease options, very common things that you would see here in the US. But when I got to the United States, when I got to New York City, I realized that the amount of networking, the opportunities to be surrounded by other people was, on steroids compared to where I was from. Brisbane happened to have a very small property meetup event that was once a month, and it just happened to be in my city that I lived in. But nowhere else around the country did that have this sort of access to other investors who were doing deals and stuff like that. So moving to the States, moving to New York City, I think being fresh off the boat for 2 weeks, I was at my first REIA event, the Real Estate Investment Association. And as a newbie, I was just blown away with the amount of access to information. There was 200 other active investors there. I got to network with these people. It was the Big Apple. It's just all these things that I just took for, maybe the average American takes for granted. I was just like, wow, this is exactly where opportunity happens. And then in terms of the nuances for real estate investing, New York City is like Australia. So think of Australia like Sydney, New York, San Francisco, LA, like very high appreciation markets. And we don't have these secondary and tertiary markets like you do. So think of like Charlotte, North Carolina, or, tertiary markets, things like, Tampa, Florida, like where there's sort of population, but there's also good attractive cap rates. And we didn't have that in Australia. So the major thing for me was access to cash flow. And that was the biggest driver. And I remember buying my first property for $38,000 in upstate New York because I could drive there, Right. So a lot of stuff said there, but yeah, the start of it was all about, and the difference is all about cash flow and access to information. For me, being a sort of fresh-faced, bushy-eyed Australian coming halfway across the world.
So really, to recapsulize that, in Australia, you're looking at more of an appreciation play. There's not much cash flow in it, but somewhere down the road, you're going to be able to sell for more than you bought for.
Correct.
Whereas that was a completely different concept here. So take us down that road a little bit. I mean, what do you have to do when you don't speak the language, right? I mean, you're in a brand new country and you're tackling this thing called real estate. I mean, what is it that you're needing to do to differentiate, set yourself apart to get your first deal, to get going?
So the biggest thing for me was learning the language, right? Learning the investment language. I didn't even know what an LLC was. I didn't even know what cash on cash return meant. I didn't even know what a cap rate was. So for me, in my early days being in New York City, was about surrounding myself with people who I aspired to be. That was the first thing. But then secondly was understanding the investment lingo. And again, that was different from me coming from Australia. And then third thing was all about sort of access to financing and being fresh off the boat. I didn't know what a credit score was. I didn't have any credit. So trying to have to develop that from scratch was, again, a learning curve in the total process of me understanding the US real estate market.
So with that, I mean, no credit, trying to figure that out. You mentioned your first deal was $38,000. Did you have a rich aunt? Were you able to creatively finance? I mean, how did that go down for you, Reed?
Yeah, it was purely through saving money. My background is in structural engineering. I went to university for structural engineering. I was able to save a bit of money prior to moving to the United States. And it was all my cash. It was my life savings at that point at 20, I think it was 26, 27. So I no one gave it to me. It was purely just saved from working a corporate job. And I could pay all cash for it, right? Like when I quickly realized that I couldn't get leverage, it was like, all right, I need a pivot here. How do I go and get a deal done? My first deal, right? Because you don't get to deal number 10 without doing deal number 1. And it was like, well, I could afford Syracuse, New York. What's so special about Syracuse? I could get to it on a 4-hour bus ride from New York City. It was cheap. It was, I could use my money, and it was my money, right? It was if something went wrong, it was only my money that I was going to lose. And I was sort of at that stage of self-education for at that point, I was about 2.5 years of just educating myself. I just knew I had to dive off from the deep end and get that first deal done. And knowing that, yeah, $38,000, if I lost $38,000, yeah, it'd suck, but I wouldn't be on the street. You know what I mean? I'd still be able to have my job and, keep a roof over my head and keep the bills paid. So when I was assessing all that quote unquote risk, I went and pulled the trigger and took down my first little deal.
So that was your first deal. What number was your last deal?
What number is my last deal? Well, today we have about 3,000 units in the portfolio, about $450 million assets under management. And that's all in Central Texas. So not even anywhere near Syracuse, New York, but, and I don't own those properties anymore. I haven't owned them for many, many years, but,
and it's not all cash.
And it's not all cash. Exactly.
You figured out how to do the leverage thing, right?
Exactly. I figured it out.
So a few things have changed, but how did you get how did you scale from one all cash deal? Cause looking back on it, look, the tenacity was there, right? But knowing what you know now, that was not very sophisticated because there was no leverage. Mm-hmm. There was nothing creative about it, right? Your cash on cash was despicable compared to what you're doing now, right? Because there was no leverage behind it. But how did that education come in and get you from there to where you're at today? I mean, what were some of the steps that you learned that brought you up that high?
Well, first thing, and back to the power of that first deal, is proving to myself I could do it, right? There's one thing of moving halfway across the world to chase a girl and live in another city. There's another thing to be like, all right, let's go do this. Let's go get going towards the goal. And I always had it inside of me that I wanted to be my own boss. I just didn't know how to get there. And real estate was that vehicle, has been that vehicle to get me to leave my day job and now do this full time. But your question about how did I pivot? It was through, again, going back to surrounding myself with certain different people. So I did 2 deals in upstate New York, and I was about to do a flip in Philadelphia. At the end of 2013, I'm having a conversation with a very good friend of mine who came down from Canada, sitting at a bar in New York City. I remember it to this day. And I'm boasting to him. I probably had, I think I had like 6 or 7 little units across, 2 or 3 deals. And I'm saying, man, I'm crushing it. I'm doing all this, all this cool stuff. Still have my day job, right? Still, grinding away, not getting paid very much as an engineer in New York City. But he then said to me, oh, that's great, man. I just closed on a 70 unit deal. And I said, 70, like 70? Like, yeah, 70. And I was like, how the hell did you do that? And he's a guy that I was already a good friend of mine. But he then went on to talk about other people's money. He went to talk on about getting a mentor. He went to talk about getting seller carryback financing, all these things that I was learning about in my education. But he'd gone and applied it on this huge scale, like tenfold, right? So now the bar is not down here. It is up here. And that's, again, another person that I didn't even know he was involved in real estate, but now there it is there. He's like, it's nearly like a challenge. Like, all right, here's Scott, a good mate of mine. All right, Reed, I'm saying to myself in my head, if he can do it, why can't you do it? Right. And that was the start. That was the start of the spark within inside me to go. And then I went down the path of, I went and got a mentor. I went and then started my own podcast about, investing here in the United States because I needed capital. I needed to raise capital from other people. And then through that mentor, I was able to co-GP on his deals. So I was able to raise money on his deals over a couple of years. And then I eventually started to go out on my own, and I started looking at my own deals. And that was then led me into my first deal, and then the second deal. And this has happened over like periods of years. I'm talking, and for your listeners out there, it's not like it's happened overnight. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of sleepless nights, coupled on top of the fact that I needed a job to stay in this country, right? I wasn't married at the time, right? I'm now married. So, there's all these things happened, and I'm sort of summarizing it really quickly and we can dive into it. But another very important part of my journey was the realization that I had a skill set that I could go and take and use it in a corporate world. So I was an engineer. I moved to LA in 2014. And when in 2014, I said to myself, I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I want to be, what job can I go get that can make me the most amount of money for a W-2 employee? I can still stay in the country and I can still keep learning. Why not? I've got a skill set. I can project manage. I can build stuff. Why don't I go work for a developer as an owner's representative? Okay, well, let's reach out to a bunch of people. And coincidentally, they love the fact that I was an engineer. I'm detail oriented. I'm really good at math and I can manage projects. I came from that institutional world, and I went and joined a developer, and I helped him build close to 500 high-end luxury apartments in Long Beach, California, over a period of about 4 years. So I was able to keep earning really good money, keep seeing how the big boys do it, these big developers go and build stuff from scratch, and keep doing my deals on the side whilst learning at the same time. And the reason I say that's a really critical part is because there's probably people listening to this show today who have a skill set that could be transferable. And that, looking back on it, it was quite a very smart step. And I didn't make it thinking, 8, 9 years later, I'd be talking to you on a podcast about what I've built, but it was a critical stepping stone to get to where I am today.
Well, and I think that's important because so many people that get into real estate leave a career and a college degree behind. And it's nice to hear that you're actually using yours to some degree, right?
To some degree.
You were able to use that and bring that into where you're at, not a, medical examiner that's now in real estate or some of the other stories I've heard. Right. But, one of the things that you brought up there in that whole thing was that there are steps, right? And that it takes time. Just chronologically, you were talking about 2013, 2 foreigners walk into a bar, have a conversation, set the bar pretty high, right? I mean, there should have been maybe a Jewish guy in there or something. We got a really great joke, but
or a horse comes in,
exactly, a parrot on my shoulder. But the reality is there were steps there, and a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot that goes on between this thing of starting in real estate and this overnight success that everybody looks at and goes, wow, Reed, you've become successful in real estate. You've written books. I mean, you've done all these things that, wow, how did that happen? Well, it started back in 2009 when you came here and started looking at Syracuse, New York. And that story often gets forgotten, and people don't realize that you've been at this for 13 years.
Right. And I'll add, when I picked out the book Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2009, it took me, I quit my corporate job in 2017. So it took me 8 years to get to
read that book.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just a super slow reader, right? But it took me 8 years to get to a point where I felt comfortable enough to say I'm going to go out and do it on my own. Now, again, I had green card and visa issues, but that just how long it takes. And to your point, there's so many quote unquote overnight successes. It will take time. It's a marathon. Yeah. It's going to take, if you want to go become financially free, it ain't going to happen in 12 months. And if you think it's going to happen in 12 months and you get to the end of 12 months and it hasn't, well, the likelihood of you quitting is a lot higher. But if you set the expectation of it could take a decade, well then, hey, you're going to be running that race for a decade, and allow yourself to grow over a decade. And then at the end of a decade, if you haven't achieved it, well, I'm sure you've achieved a lot of other things along the way. Right. So it's all about the mindset on the front end.
Well, and we often hear that, you often overestimate what you'll get done in a week, right? And underestimate what you would get done in 10 years. So looking back, Reed, you're picking up that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You're looking at that and you're going, gosh, if these concepts are true, I could do X. Mm-hmm. Are you further than X?
I'm further than X.
So that took you farther in that decade than you ever thought possible.
Correct.
Because the light shines only as far as you can see.
Right. Correct.
And you can continue to go, and you can continue to go, and you can continue to grow. And, that's where a lot of people, I think the number is almost 90%. I know it's over 75% of realtors never actually do a transaction, right? They go to real estate school, they get their license, they're going to get involved in real estate. And then comes the part where you've got to go do something with it, right?
It's hard. Right.
It's hard. You've got to go talk to your friends and family. There's the term in real estate, the undercover agent, right? Nobody knows you're in real estate because you're afraid to tell everybody that's what you do for a living, right? And it's those kinds of things where a lot of people get beat up by themselves. They get knocked out of the box by themselves. How did you deal with that with your own self? I mean, here you are, you've got to keep your day job in order to stay in this country. You're trying to figure it out. You're working with the developer. How did you ever find that time in your life where you were sitting there going, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it?
That never crossed my mind. If I'm being truly honest.
Absolutely.
If I'm being truly honest, I think it comes a little bit down to self-realization that, I don't know everything. I don't pretend to know everything. I don't ever want to know everything. And I always need to continue learning.
That's why you got married. She knows everything. Just ask her.
Exactly. She when she comes home, she'll love to hear this story,
No, she's not watching this podcast. She can't watch this podcast.
but the big thing is when you can pick up the crumbs, and they talk about success leaves clues, when you can pick that up and be grateful that, hey, this is a new opportunity. Like I remember in my engineering job going, I hate this freaking job. I freaking hate it. And it was one day that I thought, man, this could be a stepping stone into another career that you always wanted to get into. All of a sudden, my mindset's like, I love this job. Hey, what are the developers we're working with today that I could go email them? I got all their emails. I emailed them. All of a sudden, I had a job offer to go and pivot and jump to the ownership side. Right. And it's those little times in life where you bloody hell, life's got me, I hate it, it's crap, whatever, but you have to also realize what life is giving you in terms of clues to help you or steps to get you to that next step. And to your point earlier, it's not about jumping to step 20. It's about just keeping the momentum moving forward slowly. So if you are a realtor, you got your license. Well, what's the next step? Right. I remember talking to my friends and family about the fact that I'm a real estate investor. They're like, what? You're an engineer. No, you're in this box and you stay there. Well, it took me 20 times to tell them, no, this is what I'm doing, and take me seriously, because in the beginning, people didn't take me seriously.
Right.
And that can chip away at your confidence and your ego and all that sort of stuff. But knowing that you have the wherewithal to keep pushing forward, the resilience to keep pushing forward, knowing that, I always think about my 65-year-old self won't hate me for the decisions I've made today. And if you can think about it like that, then that's all that matters, right? And so I agree with it. So many people, and as I go down this path, we're all fearful of the unknown, right? The fearful of what happens if this doesn't work? What happens if I fail? Well, you've learned a bunch of stuff along the way. If that's the worst thing that can happen, if I was to lose my $38,000 and that's the worst thing that can happen, and I had to move back to Australia to my family and get another engineering job, well, that's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
A ton of people out there would love that life. So be grateful and go and take the opportunity that's been handed to you, right? So it's about the mindset and how you change the way you approach challenges and you approach risk. And when you can get comfortable with what's on the other side of that door, then you're going to walk through that door 9 times out of 10.
And, that's really true. And, one of the things that I do is, instead of asking, everybody says, well, how, you got to have a big why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy that. I just have a big, why not? I mean, tell me why not, right? Reed, exactly. We should buy that apartment complex. Sure. Why not? Yeah. Well, because we don't have any money, but we can find that, and you start, it completely changes your thought process and your mindset of trying to go, well, we need to buy it. Well, we can't. Well, why not? And now you're thinking about solutions, and you're completely solution based in your thought process, instead of going, yeah, you're right. We can't, because we're just two foreigners in a bar in New York. Right. And so it is so much about mindset. And I really love the fact that, Reed, you say that honestly, that it never crossed your mind. And I think that you'll find that is one of the clues to successful people, is they never let themselves doubt to the point that they ever think that they can't. They always know that they can. Might take a little bit longer, might be, 10 years instead of 2 years, but they never think that they can't, because we've all seen the other guys that do succeed. They're not that much different than you and I.
No. And it's about probably the only other thing that I'll add to that is grinding, right? And grinding in a way that I don't want to, this hustling and all that sort of stuff, because there is a point where you can get burnout, and we're putting that over there. I'm just talking about the getting back up on the horse, the not being afraid to roll up the sleeves and get a little dirty. That's the type of grind I'm talking about. There's obviously balance in everything, but it is, like, don't get me wrong, there's been times back when I had my full-time job, and I was like, oh God, this is so much work. But little things that I would realize, hey, is there a process in what I'm trying to do, whether it be looking at new deals or finding deals or underwriting deals, that I could outsource to someone else, because I just don't have the time or the energy, because I am working full time and I got the missus and trying to keep, healthy and get enough sleep and all that sort of stuff. And can I outsource that for $20 an hour? I know that I'm worth more than $20 an hour. Well, all right, we'll go off and do that. And that's the little things that help, again, to those stepping stones, help create procedures, help create systems that will put you in good stead for years coming, later down the line, that will make you ultimately successful. So, yeah.
Well, and that's really the thing that, I think you also see that successful people do, is they don't try and do it all themselves. Right. You have to have an understanding of what happens, right? But you want to see some funny stuff happen. Watch a non-numeric person try and balance a checkbook. Watch an engineer try and put something together quickly, right? We've all got our process, and understanding where you fit in that, and doing what you're great at, and outsourcing with pride the pieces that don't really go with you. I think that takes a bit of maturity. And like you mentioned earlier in the podcast, self-realization. Mm-hmm. Look, I mean, it's funny, but when my wife sees me get out the tools, she knows to get 911 on speed dial, right? And here I am, a general contractor, right? We've been doing this for 27 years, building things. So there's a lot to be said for that self-realization. But when you look back on it, Reed, and you look at the fact that obviously your wife and the people you surround yourself are some of the biggest key factors to your success, what does it really mean to build the team that makes Reed successful? I mean, you're the face.
Yep.
What's the team look like?
Well, I think you mentioned a really important person in there, and it's your partner, right? I think it starts when I first started on this entrepreneurial journey. I know Erica at the time was obviously my girlfriend. She probably didn't understand it, right? She didn't, nor did my friends or my family, but they supported me. They said, "Hey, yeah, if you want to go do it, go do it." Well, I don't understand it, but I'll go do it. And that helps, man. You know, I'm sure there's people listening to this podcast who have the friends, the family, the girlfriend, the boyfriend who are doubting them. We never want doubt. There's maybe some uncertainty, but there's never doubt. So I never had doubt when I was going through this process. And even to this day, like my wife is my biggest rock and, reflector of when my chips are down, right? That's why you choose a partner in life. When your chips are down, you want someone there to protect you from the world for a little bit, right? And that's I've been in those situations. We all have, and I'll be in them in the future. But it starts there. In terms of how I went and grew the team, like the first person I hired was an undergrad from USC for $15 an hour to underwrite deals for me. And I taught them my little process that I'd figured out. And this is back in, I think it was back in 14 as well, when I first moved to LA, knowing that I had a full-time job, knowing I couldn't get to underwrite all the deals that I'm seeing the brokers send me. I just didn't have the time or the energy to go do that. So, okay, we'll go hire someone for $15 an hour. If they get through 4 deals a week, well, it's 4 more deals than I don't have to get through, right? Next thing I started hiring, little things like the website designer. Like I remember trying to do a Wix website back in the day and looking absolutely shocking, right? Like what the hell am I doing? And so again, investing in yourself, and the investment in oneself, the investment in your business is a subconscious proof that you are worth it and you will not give up. Right? If you go say, okay, I'm going to spend $5,000 on a website, or $20 an hour on this person to help me underwrite deals, or learn something, or be another spoke to my wheel, that is betting on yourself. That's you're betting that this is going to work out. And so these little, again, back to the steps, these little crumbs help you build to what I've got today, which is a business partner. I have full-time employees. I have professional property management that does all the on-site, the daily on-site management of the asset. I've got an incredibly good general contracting team that I outsource all my stuff through. I supply stuff from the Asian markets in terms of flooring, hardware, lighting, granite. I've got another team member who's a part of that. So building it from the infancy that it was into what it is today, and it will be different in 10 years' time. Yeah, is the evolution of what we do as entrepreneurs, and that is what keeps me going. I'm curious about different things in the process, and I also am self-aware enough that I don't have to figure it all out at once, or I can have other people do it for me. So yeah.
Reed, and now that you're farther along than you ever thought you were going to be, and I don't know that maybe you envisioned having employees. Maybe they were a thought process of, oh yeah, someday I'll have employees, but actually knowing what those employees were going to do probably wasn't in your first thoughts back in 2014. But where do you see yourself in 10 years from now?
I get that question a lot. And the answer is, I don't know. And that's okay. Right?
So nothing's changed. What? Because you didn't know then.
Yeah.
2014.
That's the beauty of it, right? That's the beauty of it. I didn't know 10 years ago I'd be sitting here talking about systems and all that sort of stuff. And we're so focused as human beings on goals, because goals have time, right? And the biggest thing that I can allow myself is time to enjoy the journey. And when I let go of what's going to happen in 10 years, because the last 10 years have been freaking awesome, I know the next 10 years are going to be even better. And when you have that mindset to approach like that and give yourself permission to, you still want to be progressing forward and moving the ball down the fairway. That's completely true. But also reflecting on the journey that has come, and know that I have it within me to go and do whatever I set my mind to. If I'm going to be really honest, I'll probably be in some sort of, private equity type of role where I'm supporting young guys like myself to go out and find deals for me. And I'll be probably doing it across multiple countries because I'm from Australia. So we'll look at back in Australia, keep doing it here in America, but it'd be some role that I wouldn't be as active in the day-to-day business of building, and more of the, control of equity and placing capital into really, really good deals.
I interviewed Rachel Richards, who wrote a book, Money Honey, and she never made, her and her husband, when they were building their business, they never made more than $35,000 a year, I believe is the story. But she always wrote goals, and she brought a concept that I hadn't heard before, but she never completed all of her goals in a year. Mm. And I thought, well, either you don't try very hard, but obviously at the time she'd gone from, 0 to retired before 27. So she obviously did do that, but her concept was to provide more goals than we're able to accomplish, so that you were constantly striving and getting to the end of the year and going, wow, I checked off 113. No, I didn't get to the 196, but I got a lot of stuff done. Kind of that same concept of how we spend time, right? I mean, if you have 3 days to do the job, it's going to take 3 days. If you got 30 minutes, might not be as pretty, but it'll get done, right?
Right.
And so
that's exactly right.
Seeing how you've done that and putting those systems together, it sounds like you're constantly improving that system. You're constantly building on that system. You're constantly integrating more and more systems into the Reed system, if you will. What do you see in the next 2 years for yourself? Where do you see your companies growing at that point?
I think in being allowing, so I'm still very much and I have this tendency, and I know I am, is to be a bit of a bottleneck, because I want to control everything and I want to prove to my investors that I have done right by them. But I'm starting to change into, now we've got a couple of runs on the board and exit some big deals and give them back, really good returns, that I can be more confident in my own skin. Thus, I need to start being more in the CEO role and learning to delegate more. So in the next 2 years, it's about bringing more people into the team that I know that can protect me in my blind spots, and I know what they are, and making sure that I'm setting up a ship to sail indefinitely, even if I was to step aside, right? Like that's the goal here, right? It isn't to be the captain forever. It is to eventually get to a point where you have your subordinates take over the ship and you can, go do something else. I don't know.
Well, isn't that really, Reed, the true measure of how good your system is if it operates without you? If you truly become unnecessary, I think that says everything about how you set up your system and how you've really got it dialed in, because now you've envisioned it, but you've broken it up so that it functions day in, day out, with or without you.
Correct. That's exactly right. And I'm slowly learning that skill. Like most solo entrepreneurs, when you start something, it's your baby, you want to control every aspect of it. You know this as well as I do. You've done every aspect of the business, but that helps you know what you want to hire for. So I actually talk a lot about. I try and do this every 6 months. I talk about black time, blue time, red time, and green time. And black time being like that CEO type of time, and I need to allow myself to live in that time more. But when you're starting a business, you're probably going to be in a bit of the red, a bit of the blue, and you got to grind and do the things you don't like to do, like administration stuff, or think the blue time like the conveyor belt in the factory that's making the widget. Like, you don't need to be on the conveyor belt. But as I grow, those things I can spend less time in the red and the blue and more time in the black, to focus on, again, where the North Star is for the business and for myself. But when you get started, it's all about, you're doing everything, right? And you don't have enough mental time to stop and say, where am I headed now? Like, where's this going?
You definitely wind up black and blue and in the red. That's for sure. I mean, I don't know about black time or blue time, but I definitely know that there are different roles, and I know that being able to separate that out, as we've all evolved, we learn from that, and we learn what we're good at. Unfortunately, we've seen fellow operators that aren't able to see their blind spots, that aren't able to function as a CEO, and that usually doesn't go well.
No, it doesn't. But it does come back to self-realization, like, and back to what we said earlier in the show, is like knowing where you're weak at. And because you have an ego and you think you can do everything. Well, you can't do everything. It's just impossible. Yeah. We're only humans.
Well,
we're robots.
Nor do you want to, and that's where I think that, there are some people that they want to be in the middle of it all the time. And that can be disastrous for your business.
Right.
So
it can be.
Reed, before we close this out, I just want to have you tell our listeners where they can find you at and where's the best way to get some more information on you, where your books are, those kinds of things.
Sure. Yeah. Easiest way is head over to reedgoossens.com. That's reedgoossens.com. The podcast is there. The books are there. And if you're ever coming through LA, and I'll offer this to people, I usually do, is you want to go for a coffee or a beer or whatever, and you want to talk real estate, hit me up at info, that's info at reedgoossens.com. Just give me a little bit of a few weeks heads up if you're coming through, and we'll try and get something on the calendar.
Awesome. Well, guys, you can find Reed on LinkedIn and Instagram and all the other places as well. But Reed, I want to thank you for being with us today. And thank you all for tuning into the Real Estate Rundown. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Real Estate Rundown on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast to get our automatic updates. You'll also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Leave us a review. I'd love to hear back from you. And Reed, thanks again for stopping by.
Mate, thank you so much for your time.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Real Estate Rundown. Let these newfound strategies pave the way to start a successful career or a profound rebranding. If you loved everything you have heard, listen to more conversations at www.shannonrobnett.com. And be sure to leave a rating, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Until the next episode.